I think that more and more women are willing to say, I really don't need a man, and believe that.
Feminism wants that.
Yeah.
They want two people to come together equally. I think that where it has swayed too far is, hey guys, welcome to the Emily and Todd Podcast. Fewer and fewer people are deciding to get married. So we're going to dive into why that is and if it is a bad thing or good thing. Before we get started, please remember to comment and like on this video, as it does really help with the YouTube algorithm. So Todd, the decline in marriages, I feel like there's a few different reasons that come to mind. And one of those for me, I think, is just the difference in gender roles right now, and that it's so unclear. And there is more equalization, right, between partners. There's a lot of reasons why people used to get married in the past that made sense financially. But now for people that are going into a partnership, I would say it has to be for the right reasons now, which is a great thing. But I think there's less of those like wrong reasons and motivations happening, which is resulting in like fewer partners getting married, because it has to be for the right reasons. I don't know. What do you think of that?
It's a difficult question because there's no doubt that stats and studies have revealed that marriage is definitely decreasing. But on the other hand, unmarried couples who are residing together has significantly increased. And so I'm wondering what those real numbers are, because if you just look at traditional marriage, yes, they've gone down, but couples pairing up have risen. So I'm wondering if that's kind of maybe the first shift, looking at it from a sociological level.
Which makes sense because that's more widely accepted now, right?
Yes.
Is for people to live together unmarried and to even have kids together.
Yeah, I was going to say that next, that before that was something that was really taboo.
Yeah.
And now it's something where it's widely socially acceptable in the West to have children out of wedlock.
It makes sense. And then I think that there's other parts of it, right? Is why are people deciding to live together but not sign a document and have those like legal ramifications? And I think that a lot of those things are justified because for people that have maybe had parents that ended up in divorce, they've seen those legal ramifications
Yes.
of signing that document. So it's like, then why even sign the document and go through that?
Absolutely. I think a lot of people are saying at this point in history, why do I need a legal contract to show that I found my partner and get the government involved? And it's one of those things where that's an important question to ask. Why would you do that if you can do it without it? And especially since a lot of the marriage laws do end up favoring women, for guys, it ends up being something where it turns into the zero-sum game if things go bad.
Oh, that's a common comment on my videos, is from men saying, why would marriage be worth it now? Which I think that a lot of women can take the wrong way because, they hear that and they're like, well, what do you mean? Like, we're not worth it to you? But like, I get it, because what marriage used to be based off of was sort of like, she brought something unique to the table and he brought something unique to the table. And it was that combination that was needed for a family. But now it's like each person, depending on whatever gender, is bringing equal of everything to the table. They can survive just fine individually.
Yes.
Which like is great on an individual basis. But I think it works against some of those like traditional reasons why people got married.
Also, the research has shown that people who are married are in general happier and healthier. If you think about it, it makes sense. As human beings, we're social creatures. Having that pair bond that is cemented through a legal contract is something that has been demonstrated to improve one's health overall. So that's kind of where it's the sticky argument of, do we kind of throw out some of the antiquated rules or societal norms that we've embraced for so long in order to have an experience where potentially you're living with somebody and even having children with them, but that you don't have that contract. And also, I think another reason is the fact that religion is slowly dying. Mm-hmm. And I think that a lot of marriage is traditionally around religion.
I can totally see that.
You can argue if that's a positive or a negative thing, but I really believe that society's structure is dependent upon families.
That's the thing, right?
That leads me to, another huge reason why marriage is on the decline is because of female empowerment and feminism. And we have to talk about that because it's something that, like you had, stated earlier, that it's about things being equal. Mm-hmm. And it's something where if you're a woman and you're successful and you're educated, it's one of those things where why would you necessarily, especially if you don't want children, why would you go down that route? I think that more and more women are willing to say, I really don't need a man. And believe that.
Feminism wants that. Yeah. They want two people to come together equally. Mm-hmm. I think that where it has swayed too far is where women still expect a man to make more than her. Mm-hmm. Instead, if there's no pay gap, potentially she could be earning more than him.
Well, I think that's going to happen in the future.
Yeah.
And it's going to be the near future. If you look at universities, they're mostly women now. And on average, people make about $1 million more in their lifetime if they have a college education versus not. And so you're seeing all these educated women who are going to be in careers and doing well for themselves. And then there's all these guys who aren't in school. Mm-hmm. And yeah, maybe they're in the trades. That's great. But I think that there's also a lot of guys who are just kind of falling through the cracks. So it's going to make it more and more difficult for a woman to find a man that's even earning the same amount as her, let alone higher. Mm-hmm.
It's almost like this ongoing contradiction. Mm-hmm. I think that's where the problem lies, is for a woman to want both things. If she wants to have him earn more than her, but she wants them to be equal, like that's not going to be reality.
No.
And the motivation has to be to just have that partnership, and that's why you're getting married. Mm-hmm. And it really has no financial basis, which I think is difficult for people.
Well,
right?
I think it's still kind of that old school thinking, and this is also what I'd ask our audience, do you believe in hypergamy? Because that's kind of what is the root of this, is saying that women want to date, generally speaking, across and above, and that means definitely with socioeconomic status as well. Mm-hmm. So if that's the case, and then more women are in school right now, how are they going to find their partners if they don't have the insight or understanding that there needs to be this kind of shift? Because again, in prior years, it made a lot of sense because women were staying at home. They weren't in the workforce, or if they were, it was part-time, or if it was in a lot of roles that didn't pay that well. Mm-hmm. So for example, like in the 60s and 70s, there was a hell of a lot more doctors than there was male doctors, than female ones, but there was a hell of a lot more female nurses, who earned significantly less compared to physicians. Mm-hmm. So, but we're starting to see that shift. Like there's more women in medical school right now, and there's more guys going into nursing.
Is there more women in total, like more than men in medical school?
Yes.
Currently?
Yes.
Holy cow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, in the West, in the U.S.
Yeah.
So that's something that, so if you get to the point where you're a physician, it's going to be difficult to find someone who's going to earn more than you.
I know. And then what? I think that's where the dilemma is.
I'm wondering why that is, though. I mean, honestly, look, besides, looking at evolutionary psychology and hypergamy, because it could be, because, all the concepts we talk about, like cold approach, for example, how much of that is just socialization as far as saying the man has to do that? Mm-hmm. Why can't a woman do that? I'm just questioning this. Same type of thing. If a woman makes more, but she's with a guy that she's really into, and he makes less, why can't that be a thing? Like if we're talking about evolving as a species, we can't live by the old rules and then have, these, like you talked about, these gender roles that are still in place.
I totally see that viewpoint. And yeah, that's an excellent question. I think the first thing that comes to mind is if she's planning on having kids, then what does that look like? That means a huge pay decrease if she needs to stay home for a period of time. Or if you're arguing, well, maybe she doesn't stay home and he does, like, then that's a whole nother like gender role shift. And I think that would work. I think that couples do that now already. There's some stay-at-home dads.
Yeah, I think that's so tough though, because don't you think, as a mom yourself, that the first at least couple of years is so important. And most women kind of are much closer to the child at that point than men, and then the kind of dads take over as they get a little older.
Yeah, and what I'll say about that being...
Especially breastfeeding, things like that.
That's and it's actually, there's a lot of pieces to that makes it very challenging to be working outside of the home, away from the baby. And I would say that there's a lot of women out there that are not moms, and they just don't have any idea. They think that they can work after having the baby. And I've seen time and time again when her mind shifts after the baby has arrived. And that's a difficult thing to work through. But then again, there's a lot of women that already know that that's what they want to do. They want to have the baby and stay home for a period of time. So in those cases, it makes sense to me why she's looking for a guy to earn a significant amount. I still think that if she's worked up to a crazy amount of money that she's earning and she loves this guy, there has to be some give and take. She needs to be willing to sacrifice. Yeah. If she wants to be the one to stay at home.
So how do you feel about just the institution of marriage just dying off and having people cohabitate and raise children together? And, because everybody can choose the lifestyle they want, but some people are just completely monogamous. You're one of those people. But there's other people like Destiny who are, into open relationships. So I'm just wondering what your feelings are about the fact that this may be inevitable.
Yes, I think that the institution of marriage should continue because I think it's the basis of families. And I think that is so important, especially for children growing up in an environment where there's two parents, both, mom and dad, there in the house.
So that couldn't be done, though, without a government piece of paper?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question because it could be argued, right, that you could go get married in your church and just not send in the paperwork to the state, potentially.
I think it mostly comes down to kind of how society sees that, as far as saying, okay, if we're doing that, there's this feeling that even though half of the marriages don't work out, and probably much more that aren't working, and still people are still being married, but it's there's, in the past anyways, what I think is starting to dissolve is there's been this highly incentivized social pull for people to get married. And if you didn't, you were considered an outcast or an outsider.
Something's wrong with you. You're
Something's
still
wrong
single.
with you. Exactly. And I think what's happening is that stigma is starting to decrease. And so then people are saying, do I really want to do this? And then, so that this, all the stuff we've discussed so far is more like macro level stuff. I'm wondering, and we've talked about this in other episodes, but just how much at a micro level it's really about speaking to how people are meeting, the dating apps. And I know this kind of goes to macro, but, for example, how the pandemic has changed society. So the warm environments that were in existence are gone now. And also people are working from home much more.
Absolutely. Yeah. So there's less human to human interaction. And, I thought about that too with the pandemic, is there were probably a hold off on marriages going on.
Oh, for
and
sure.
And then also I think those people were being stuck together.
Well, I did read a stat that said that in the U.S. it was 320,000 marriages got canceled.
Wow.
Because of that year, and it was almost 2 years that we were kind of in lockdown and we weren't able to.
And I really almost question how many of those got rescheduled, because like for those people that were dating 6 months and decided to get married, and then they couldn't have the wedding, and then they lived together for another year. Are they deciding to still get married, or have they now found out some things about each other? And
yeah, especially if they resigned together or just spent a lot of time together, which they probably did, because there wasn't a lot of social outlets to, you couldn't even go to most restaurants for a long period of time.
The concern was so high. So yeah, there was less human-to-human interaction, and couples were forced together.
Yes.
For longer durations.
Yeah, so maybe they said, hey, I don't want to do this.
Yeah, it wasn't working.
Well, the other thing we haven't really talked about that much, and which traditionally really hasn't been true, but I think it's more and more true in our current society, is that people seek more freedom. The ability to kind of, because in traditional marriages, you see a lot of couples that are kind of joined at the hip. So they kind of do, when it comes to socialization, they do everything together. And I'm wondering, kind of if the younger generations, if they're saying, oh, that doesn't feel like great to me. Do you know what I mean? Like if I want to go on a trip, I can go with my boys. I don't need to have my wife there. And, I'm not going to do anything except, play golf or watch a game or something. But at the same time, it's one of those things where a lot of times that just wouldn't fly.
No, I think that there definitely is more individualism.
I think that ideally there needs to be a renaissance of family. And, that people get sick enough of that kind of isolation and all the mental health issues and physical health issues that come along with that. And it ends up being something where there's a movement where it ends up like marriage is cool again.
I think that pairs along with monogamy. I think there needs to be a resurgence of monogamy.
I agree. I agree.
Well, I think it'll be interesting to hear from our audience. Let us know, guys, what your experience has been. What is your opinion, especially if you're a younger guy, on marriage, and if you're considering it, or if not, and why?